Well, John, I am here again outside the White House, where you can see probably a couple of hundred protesters here behind me. We're much closer to the White House today, and I have to say several hundred of them were still here digging in till the early hours of the morning, surrounded by a very heavy presence of troops and police. As we speak, as you just said there, John, the first of 4 memorial services is getting underway for George Floyd in Minneapolis. I think we can see those images there now.
It's mine. No, he'll never put more on me than I can bear.
Thank you. His body was taken to that university hall that you can see there a couple of hours ago in a golden casket. The service is expected to last about 2 hours, and we'll hear during that time from the high-profile lawyer of the family, Benjamin Crump. At least 3 members of Mr Floyd's family are also expected to speak, and the eulogy later on will be given by the Reverend Al Sharpton, who said ahead of his remarks earlier today that George Floyd was a human being. He had family, he said, he had dreams, he had hopes. We know, I think we can see it there in the pictures, that above the pulpit an image has been projected of a mural that was painted on a wall at the spot where George Floyd died about 10 days ago, at the knee of a police officer. Those officers yesterday had their charges upgraded. The first officer had his charge upgraded from 3rd-degree murder to 2nd-degree murder. The 3 other police officers for aiding and abetting 2nd-degree murder. All of those charges come with a maximum sentence of 40 years. Back here in Washington, though, it is the excessive use of FBI, Secret Service, troops, National Guard that is causing so much controversy, and which has sparked this stinging rebuke about the president's tactics from the former Defense Secretary, James Mattis.
For the 6th night, they marched in their thousands, blocked on all sides by a wall of armed troops, and came to stand in the shadows of a government sworn to protect them. Pushed back from the public park around the White House, swarms of peaceful protesters came face to face with police in riot gear. Despite threats from President Trump and COVID-19, tens of thousands of Americans defied curfew orders like here in LA and came out in the name of the black man, George Floyd, killed by a white police officer. And as they did, an ever-increasing presence of police and National Guard were deployed to meet them. Observing the heavy-handed tactics, the former Defense Secretary and revered Marine General James Mattis broke months of public silence and attacked the forcible removal of protesters in front of the White House this week as an abuse of executive authority. Donald Trump, he said, does not try to unite the American people. He tries to divide us. We do not need to militarize our response to protests. All of us are equal before the law. In response, the president called him the world's most overrated general, despite describing him like this when Mattis was appointed.
He's a special, special man, tremendous soldier, always has been. He's a general's general.
The current Defense Secretary, Mark Esper, didn't answer our questions when we caught up with him on Monday night as he inspected troops after the now infamous crackdown at the White House.
Was the use of tear gas on the crowd outside the White House wholly necessary this evening?
But yesterday he turned tail, contradicting the president and saying he did not support the use of active military personnel to quell the protests. Yet today, the Pentagon confirmed to Channel 4 News that Army soldiers have been dispatched to Washington from bases in New York and North Carolina and are currently being held in the area. Mr. Esper's move prompted a defiant rebuttal from the president last night.
Right now, I think the nation needs law and order, because you have a bad group of people out there, and they're using George Floyd to try and do some bad things. And what we do, and we have it totally under control.
This bad group of people sat in a street near the White House, the nation's capital, the supposed center of global democracy, and sang "Lean on Me" last night. A tribute to the man they're calling their brother, George Floyd. As they sang, they were penned in by an array of FBI, Secret Service, police and National Guard deployed across the city. George Floyd's body was taken to a college in Minneapolis today for the first of 4 memorial services before the man whose killing has sparked a national movement is laid to rest in Houston, Texas on Tuesday.
Siobhan Kennedy reporting. Well, joining us now is retired Lieutenant General Russel Honore, who was in charge of the National Guard troops in New Orleans after Hurricane Katrina and has served as a deputy on the US National Security Council. General Honore, thank you very much indeed for joining us. Can I just ask you that in the context of the terrible events of these last few days, Mr. Trump's erstwhile Defence Secretary, James Mattis, really went for the president and said, you know, that he had really totally lost it. What's your feeling about what he said and whether it's right for a general to say such a thing, or a Defence Secretary?
Well, that's the great thing about a democracy. We got a freedom of speech. And there are many people that agree with General Mattis' opinion that the threat of the use of the Insurrection Act and imposing the president's will inside the states would be appended to the Posse Comitatus Act, which prevents the federal government from sending federal troops to influence a local situation. And the conditions the presidents were looking at, and it cohorted the current Secretary of Defense. Many of us who know the law, know the Constitution, knew this was going to be a stretch, and it would break the good faith we have with our troops and the American people. The purpose of American troops is to save the American people's lives. And when we need it, we go. And I'm using that word we because I'm retired, as was the case in Katrina. We brought in 20,000 federal troops working with the National Guard. As in the COVID, we have over 10,000 federal troops, 2 ships mobilized to go save lives. That's not the same when you're talking about using American troops, combat troops, for civil disturbance. And the National Guard has a role working for the governor, but they work for the governor, not the president. And they're very narrow window that the Insurrection Act has been used. President Eisenhower used it to integrate schools. And in 1992, President Bush used it at the request of the California governor and the LA mayor to quell the Rodney King riots.
But that's just on this particular issue. I mean, do you think democracy was at risk? Or should American troops really be occupying so many cities in America?
Well, they're not. It's the National Guard works for the governors. And that's one of the reasons each state has a National Guard for disasters, or as the governor seem fit to use the National Guard to save lives or to deal with civil disturbance. And
Can I ask you, General? Sorry to rush you on, but we don't have a lot of time. Can I just ask you whether profoundly you feel that America has changed anything like enough since the death of Martin Luther King?
Not nearly enough. There was a great promise that change would be made, and it had not come to fruition when it comes to justice, health disparities, as we saw with the COVID, the population that took the hardest hit. We did not make the improvements we need. We've got multiple cases where police shoot people on television. We got the film, police have the body cameras, and nothing happened. The bad cops stay out there. That has to be fixed. And I think that's what enraged the people. But it has woke the giant, and that is called democracy. This nation was built on the people of America revolting as needed. You know the story of that. And I think we'll be okay, but they're going to have to make some changes that's going to have to become law.
General, thank you very, very much for joining us. Thank you.